Hello, everyone, and welcome to this DD Hangout show, this edition of the show. My name is Gary Middleton. I'm a business development manager within the networking business unit at Dimension Data. And together with Chris O'Brien, we're going to talk about data center networking. But we're going to delve into some of the important considerations for data center networking and what you need to think about when putting these networks together. But first, let me introduce my co-host based in Natick in Massachusetts in the US. Chris is a solutions manager for the Americas Networking Business Unit. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Gary.
But before we get started, I wanted to mention to everyone that if you have comments during the show or questions, please share them on the Google Plus event page or simply tweet using the hashtag DD Hangouts. And we'd love to get any feedback or questions you might have. And if you're catching the recording of this show, please send your feedback through any of the digital channels that Dimension Data has, and we'll be sure to get back to you. But on to the topic of the day. We're talking about data center networking. But before we get into some of the questions around what the considerations are, I wanted to give you a high-level description about what we mean by data center networking and our business performance in this particular area over the last few years. Data center network essentially covers all of the networking devices, technologies, practices that underpin and support our clients' data centers today. If we talk about connecting the client servers, the applications need to be connected into the network. That's a key element of the data center network. We also talk about how to deliver network services in this particular solution, where we can talk about DNS, DHCP, IP address management being a key element of a data center network, and of course around application services and making sure that the applications can be accelerated and delivered from the data center so that the user has a good quality of experience when connecting to the applications. Those are all functions of the network, and we've seen dramatic change in the way that networks are architected inside the data center. We've seen the emergence of specialist data center switching technologies with things like back-to-front airflow that really fit into the other technology that's deployed inside the data center. So huge change, huge disruption to networking, but very specifically focused on the data center. And the data center network of today is very, very different from the data center network of 6 years ago, where generalist networking infrastructures would be deployed in a three-tier architecture. That simply doesn't work in the modern age and for the modern data center. And if we look at the Dimension Data business in this area, 6 years ago our revenue was zero, and today we have a $500 million networking business specifically in this space. It's grown very, very quickly to become 20% of our networking business, and just goes to show the huge demand our clients have for this kind of solution and this kind of architecture, and especially the huge kind of demands that they're expecting their data centers to deliver for their businesses. And we truly believe that the network is the foundation and the platform upon which the modern data center can be built. So a very critically strategic area for our clients. But Chris, I wanted to ask you specifically, we've seen a lot of hype around software-defined networking, a lot of hype around programmable network infrastructures. What are your views on how this plays a role in the data center network?
Well, Gary, it plays an incredibly important role moving forward. The first step was, as you mentioned, was re-architecting the data center network, moving from a historical three-tier network towards more of a fabric where it accommodated the east-west traffic flow demands in addition to the historical north-south demands. Once you have that fabric in place, the next step becomes quite simply automating, leveraging that capability by removing the manual requirement to manually configure ports, links, etc. The idea of a network fabric is that when a component gets plugged in, it's a plug and play. It automatically becomes configured and automatically comes online, and that's one of the concepts from network fabrics that's been brought forth. And SDN will leverage that through the use of controllers and application-specific profiles get pushed out to the network elements.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You talk about programmability of the networks, and we often we believe that the data center is the first place that this programmability will be such an important factor. There's so much change in the application structures, in virtualization has changed everything inside the data center, and certainly cloud has too. And the network really needs to cope with that. And the network ultimately has to be automated and programmable in a way that will facilitate that level of functionality. And just for the audience out there, we've seen tremendous interest in programmable fabrics inside our client data centers, and just massive growth in the technology and solution set for programmable ready networking, if you like. And that particular piece of our data center business is growing substantially faster than our general networking business. So very, very interesting. Thank you for that, Chris. But if we start talking a little bit more specifically around the topic of the day, around the considerations for data center networks, I'd just like to point out that we have a new white paper available on dimensiondata.com that talks about 5 considerations for data center networking that you can download and have a look at. But I'd also like to point out that we have a tremendous amount of other thought leadership material related to not just data center networks, although there is a substantially large amount of collateral available there that talks about programmable infrastructures. We have got papers on the security related to programmable infrastructures. But beyond that, we have good sets of material around WANs and hybrid WANs, around wired and wireless infrastructures, and a lot of very good material. And I recommend that anyone watching the show go and take a look at dimensiondata.com and have a look at some of our thought leadership material there. But if we look into the topic of the day, applications are absolutely critical for our clients' businesses. And our clients' business don't run on networks. They run on applications. So, Chris, can you give us your perspective on how important applications are for our clients?
Well, business today is about applications. Applications are what make business run, from the back-end ERP applications for human resources and financials to actually delivering applications as a service as being the fundamental business model that a company employs. And not only are applications critical, but how they're being delivered is being changed. We see more and more software as a service like Salesforce.com and Workday. These formerly monolithic, vertically integrated applications that required a great deal of infrastructure to support them are now being put into a cloud, either private or public, and now being able to be accessed by employees almost anywhere. And that's dramatically changing the traffic flows within the data center and outside of it. Again, so it's not just north-south anymore, but applications may reside in a data center, then may have to go out to a cloud component to gather more information. So applications not only change the way business is being done, but it's changed the way networking is being conducted.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. And it's really interesting that we often think about applications and that many of our clients are running just a few. That's just a misconception. I've seen lots of our clients that are running 3,000 plus applications. In fact, I've even heard of one client running around 30,000 applications, and it seems bizarre to us when we're throwing these numbers around, just how that is actually possible. But the number of applications our clients run, depending upon the sophistication of their business, it's just phenomenal. And you need specialist networking infrastructure to handle all of those apps. Those apps could be resident in an on-premise data center infrastructure, and as you mentioned, it could be in a cloud. And how does the network need to look? What architecture does the network need to take to enable our clients to get the best from all these thousands of applications that are running their business? Considering the performance requirements, considering that these are some of them virtualized, some of them are physical, and given that users are connecting to these applications from any location using a myriad of different devices. So, and it's the network function, it's the network's job to do all of that. So there's no doubt that the the network today is under significant pressure. So good, thanks very much, Chris. I think if we look at the next topic around data growth, I think in our white paper we talk about data growth being inevitable, and that's absolutely true. We've often seen statistics around the growth of data, and in fact I saw one just the other day that said we've created more data in the last 18 months than we have in all previous time put together. So just the quantity of data that we're producing as a human species at the moment is just unbelievable. And our first thought is, how do we store that, and how do we keep track of all that data? But often we don't consider the impact that data will have to the network. All of that traffic needs to traverse some kind of network at some point, and if we consider that we're creating all this data, the network is just under more and more pressure. And that's driving the need for faster networks. And we've seen inside the network, inside the data center, growth from 1 gig to 10 gig, and that's become the staple bandwidth speed within the data center network today, connecting servers. But beyond that, we're starting to see growth to 40 gig and 100 gig becoming far more common within our clients' data centers. And we know that this is never going to stop. Data growth is never, ever going to stop. We see more sophisticated applications, much more data being used by our users. And I suspect over the next 12 months, we probably will create more data than all of history, from this date forward. So, the network, we see that renewal and that performance requirements of the data center network never going away. So I think just a critical factor. And if you just throw a couple more stats out there, we expect normal IP traffic, just normal business IP traffic, to be growing at around 20% compound annual growth rate. That's already quite a big number. But if we start factoring in things like cloud, cloud is going to drive IP traffic growth at 32% compound annual growth rate. And I've seen clients that are growing their IP traffic at around 60% per year when they start converging their networks for things like voice and video, and we start converging the network fabric inside the data center for storage. Those kinds of growth rates are just huge, and the network needs to cope. And often our clients would say, well, the network can cope. Let's just throw all these new applications and data on the network. And I think it's short-sighted not to think that a network needs to be re-architected to cope with that stuff. And in fact, what we're starting to see, and we have seen for the last couple of years, is that the depreciation cycle for network infrastructure in the data center is substantially shorter than it is in campus networking. And it's simply because network devices need to be refreshed that much more regularly inside the data center to cope with the amount of traffic growth that we're seeing. So, yeah, a very big and important factor to look at. If we move beyond that, and Chris, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned earlier around automation. I think automation is going to be one of the most important factors that we talk about in the networking industry in the next 12 to 18 months. So I'm really glad you raised that. I mean, what are your perspectives and ideas around automation for data center networks?
So, Gary, even Cisco says that the operational savings to be achieved through automation is the primary use case right now for SDN and SDN models. When you factor into account that human error is the driving factor behind most network outages, the fact that you could automate that network, and not only would you do it faster, removing a lot of the time that's involved. I talked to a customer, a service provider, who once said that it took them 18 months to do a refresh of their network. But with new automation tools that were available and new routers from Cisco, they could do that theoretically in half a day, which is an amazing and dramatic. The idea that you can, and the way the automation tools are structured, they can remove the need to create downtimes, Saturday night upgrades, for example, because they're structured in a way such as they will roll back automatically if any error is encountered. So when you start to look at just the operational and efficiency savings being driven by this, that alone is enough to justify it. And then you look at one of the driving use cases is also VM migration, the ability to move VMs around in a data center automatically and not have to, when you start to look at the number of virtual machines that would be asked to move and the kind of mobility that's required, doing that on a manual basis is just not possible. It would just slow it down and make it unfeasible. So in order to have real VM mobility, you would need to have a fully automated data center network.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I think the industry's perhaps gotten a little run ahead of itself when we start talking about programmable infrastructures and software-defined networking. There's just so much hype around that, and I think those kind of fully programmable, fully automated networks will certainly be a reality in the future to come. But I think that that's some years away. And what we're, as Dimensionator, are really starting to see is that there's a ton of network automation things that we can apply to not just the data center, but to other areas, of the network to fulfill some of those things that you're talking about. And a couple of examples. We have one of our clients, a very large retail company. They've deployed an automated network inside the data center, and through that process and through being able to automatically provision some of the network services like application delivery, like firewalling, they've been able to automate the provisioning of those things, the deprovisioning, and some of the automation around operations of that infrastructure. They've been able to see significant benefits to their business and their technology infrastructure. One is that they have been able to significantly reduce the number of firewall appliances that they have. Previously, they had around 60 firewalls. They've been able to reduce that to around 16. That's just huge savings. In terms of the complexity of their firewall rule base, they were able to reduce that from around 5 million rules to around 1 million. Again, just significant savings in complexity. And through that process, they believe they would save around 20% operational cost savings through that process. So, the savings achieved or that can be achieved by automation are substantial, and we'd certainly advocate our clients, looking to do automation as soon as possible. And it doesn't have to be big; it can be really small. And we're starting to see, internally within Dimension Data, our engineering teams writing Python scripts to fulfill a particular function that they've been doing manually over years. So a simple example is, one of our clients needed us to, on a regular basis, check the temperature that their networking infrastructure was running at. And what that required in the past was a log onto the device, run a few commands on the command line, get the response and what the actual core temperature of the device is running at. And through a simple Python script, we've been able to automate that, saving hours of effort to get that done. So I think there's going to be lots of examples of that kind of thing. Simple scripting, simple automation around some of the operational pieces that save hours and days of deployment and hours and days of operation. And that's really going to change some of the way that we do operations. And Chris, I know you wanted to specifically talk around DevOps. Do you have any particular comments around DevOps and how that relates to networking?
So, for those of you who aren't familiar, DevOps is very simply, and forgive me for oversimplifying, but it's the notion that the development teams that are responsible for building applications and delivering them work side by side with the operations team so that they can make changes and deliver new versions of code in real time. And there's no longer this notion that there's a monthly, quarterly, biannually software train release, but that updates are done in a real-time basis as needed by customers. Now, clearly, if the network is static and not dynamic, you cannot deliver those upgrades or those new applications in the time to leverage the new DevOps methodology. So the network has to adapt to it, and then consequently, you really can't benefit from SDN technologies and automated and programmable networks unless internally the company is adopting more of a DevOps methodology. So it's good to talk to a customer around how they're changing their business processes. If a customer doesn't adapt their business processes to leverage these new changes in networking, it's going to be a lot harder to get them to upgrade and to embrace it. So there's really two things. There's the capabilities have to be there, and then there has to be the commitment and the mindset inside of an organization to take advantage of that. And again, what you're seeing now in software coding, for those of you who aren't familiar, is developers working side by side with networking people to rush out new upgrades to code, getting them tested, and then getting them out to customers in real time, as opposed to saying, well, we do an upgrade every 6 weeks or every 6 months.
Yeah, great stuff, Chris. Thank you. So moving on to the next one of our considerations for the data center network is user experience. And we've mentioned a couple times through the program so far that users are connecting to applications from loads of different places, clearly from their work, from home, from their travel locations, and they're using a load of different devices, laptops and mobile phones and tablets, etc. And the thing about modern users is that they expect, and in some cases, and in many cases, actually demand the same level of performance, irrespective of where they're connecting from, and irrespective of what they're using to connect. And it's the network's function, it's the network's job to enable that. So, a lot of what we've been talking about with, fast-performing networks inside the data center, networks that can cope with all the applications, that's one thing. But how do you get those applications delivered to the users and give them that good quality of experience? That, in our view, is a critical piece of the data center network puzzle. And in our view, it's looking at what level of performance optimization do you need to include with that. What kind of application delivery infrastructures do you put in place to load balance across your physical and virtual infrastructures to create a high availability for your applications? The network can perform a significantly important role in ensuring applications are more available. The network can also perform a role around making sure that those applications are more secure by delivering application firewalling capability within the network. I think that's another very, very important piece. And then lastly, as the traffic leaves the data center, making sure that it's optimized, accelerated, and can get to that user in the most efficient manner, irrespective of which distance that user is connecting from, so that the user can have a good quality of experience. And we've seen through our own research, through the analyst community, that sometimes a performance degradation is as bad as a complete failure of the IT infrastructure. If a user has to wait too long for the application to respond, oftentimes they give up and they simply don't fulfill their job function. So the network optimization, application delivery is a critical element of the data center network. As we go forward, we're starting to see much more use of virtual instances or virtual editions of these network services. So whether you're talking about a WAN optimization controller, whether you're talking about an application delivery controller, or a firewall or intrusion prevention device, whatever kind of network service you are considering to deploy inside your data center network, we're seeing virtual editions starting to be deployed. And the beauty about this is that you can deploy them on demand. Where they're required, you can scale them up and scale them down as needed for the applications or as the amount of users that are connecting to your applications really need. And that's starting to help us build out a far more elastic data center network infrastructure, which is really interesting for some of our clients. And because it's elastic, and because some of these partners that we're working with are coming out with different licensing models, it becomes a very attractive financial discussion to be had around how we can do this, not only from a technology perspective, from a financial perspective. It makes huge sense. So very exciting space, but very important just to go back to making sure we include user experience as a critical element of the data center network. So we just got a few minutes left, and I wanted to use this time to wrap up a little bit and talk about Dimension Data's experience in data center networking. And we really have built over the last 6 years a substantially large business in the space. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that we have our revenue here is around the $500 million mark for the current year. So we must be, a very, one of the top players, if not the top player, in system integration, delivering data center networks for our clients around the world. And that puts us in a very strong position to help and advise. And if we look at our approach with clients, we start out by having a set of consulting offerings. We can consult to clients in all of the 58 countries that we operate in around the world in what the architecture of the network should look like or could look like. We can do architecture reviews of the existing network. We can provide architecture consulting around the future state network architecture, given our strength in networking hardware, software-defined networking solutions, network virtualization solutions, and our heritage in networking. We take that all into account when putting these consulting offerings together. I think from a solution perspective, I've already spoken through the size of our business, but if we look at, we are a multi-vendor networking company. We have all of the leading partners in the industry in our portfolio, be it hardware vendor, but also software vendor. And we also have the leading capability in network services. So we're number one with Riverbed, we're number one with F5, we're number one with Infoblox. So being able to apply the leading technologies and our scale together, we really are in a very, very strong position to help our clients build out appropriate data center network architectures for them. And then lastly, around services and managing this infrastructure once it's in, we have a very robust set of managed services and outsource enterprise services to help our clients operate their infrastructures far more efficiently. And we're not talking about new offerings here. We have a very robust, mature managed service offer. We have 6 million devices under management for 6,000 clients. We handle around 1.5 million transactions per day from these devices that we manage across our 6 global service centers across the world. So we have a very mature, robust set of managed services that we can bring to bear for our clients. So I think we're in a very strong position to help here. Chris, just handing it back to you, do you have any specific client wins or client stories that you'd like to relate to the audience?
Well, we do have a win with Oracle where we're going to be deploying the Cisco ACI in their data center and working with them. Now, it's not going to be a homogeneous, it's a heterogeneous data center with multiple different vendors, so we'll be working with integrating different designs and different products, but it's a significant win for us.
All right, fantastic. Good stuff. So the final parting thought I'd like to leave is that, again, Dimension Data, we're in a very strong position to help our clients with data center networking. Please take a visit to dimensiondata.com to get our latest thought leadership material. And Chris, any final thoughts from you around data center networks?
Well, just that the changes in networking today are the most dramatic in several decades, and they're happening very quickly. So it's incumbent upon us to be consultative with our customers to help guide them through this very dramatic upheaval in the networking world and to understand how to transition from a very static, configured network to a very dynamic, flatter, and more greatly utilized network.
Great stuff, Chris. Thank you very much for attending this and helping deliver this particular session. And thanks to the audience for watching, and appreciate anyone who can catch the recording. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.